So it's pretty clear at this point I've been making Pikmin videos for a long time, and though I've only recently started to upload so regularly and sporadically once again, I've collected a good few amount of Pikmin ideas from you guys over the years. Now on this channel we've discussed new Pikmin ideas many times, predicting colours, body parts and mechanics, but there's still room for more ideas, more extravagant ideas that people have commented, but have rarely been considered too seriously. Well, today we're going to do just that. Here are some Pikmin 4 unusual Pikmin ideas. But first, since I can't post when I'm live when I'm actually live, here's my streaming schedule for the week. I'm usually always streaming Saturday and Sunday at least, but if this video is old, check out my Twitch or Twitter page, that's Daz Videos for both of them, to see the latest schedule. Right, on with the video. Number 1 on our list was a suggestion for Spring Pikmin. Unfortunately, I couldn't source many of the comments these ideas came from simply because I only remember them in passing and I would have had a giant backlog of 6 years to research to find it again. Now, upon first hearing this idea, I jumped to the mechanics of Super Mario Galaxy, with the Spring Mushroom allowing Mario to jump to extreme heights, though he also struggled to stay still or stick to the ground. He was also given the ability to bounce off of the walls, so how could this translate over to Pikmin? Well, for a start, as a physical attribute, it sounds like the form of this Pikmin could be inclusive of a coiled stem, much like the Whip Seed power-up from Pikmin Adventure in Nintendo Land. Though as other traits, they could also have a coiled tail like a pig, or could be deformed to be entirely springy, like Mario from Super Mario Galaxy. Now, as a mechanic, we come to our first hiccup. Having a Pikmin that can jump particularly high oversteps the traits of the yellow Pikmin in that regard, and so would need to be tweaked to not go down that road. Additionally, the idea I first had to combat this would be to have them thrown directly upwards. However, finding uses for this kind of trajectory seemed too difficult and could also be overshadowed by the use of winged Pikmin. As if there was something up high on a ceiling to collect, the wings could simply swarm up there. But perhaps as a strange new addition to the Pikmin trajectories, what if this Pikmin specifically had the ability to bounce? My first thought again pulls back to Mario Galaxy, whereby we can bounce them off of walls to gain higher heights. This could be particularly helpful in some kind of vertical vent of some kind. While most Pikmin couldn't reach the top, the Spring Pikmin could continuously wall jump up top to maybe release a climbable stick or vine, or to simply take on the higher ground. If we had that kind of old sticky hazard from our Pikmin 4 hazard idea, which you can see linked up top right now, and attached to the end screen of this video, they could even be the Pikmin type to destroy any kind of stickiness, with their momentous force on any surface completely breaking down whatever's sticking to them. Additionally, when there isn't a wall in front of their trajectory, perhaps they can be bounced 2 or 3 times ahead, giving them a much more horizontal range over the other Pikmin types. Now I'm imagining that Kirby golf game, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but that kind of multiple bouncing effect. This means they would also be bouncing less and less each time they hit the ground. This could even introduce a unique, albeit fairly limited hazard of having a series of stepping stones on a body of water, spaced perfectly for the Spring Pikmin's trajectory to bounce across, if you aim on an X on the ground or something. For coloration, I would have imagined a silver tone, as is often associated with springs, and as for combat, I don't see the need for too much to be introduced, as it's not usually a necessity. But perhaps the elongated range and bounciness could mean that they can rise and latch onto a creature even on the second or maybe third bounce. It'd be the dynamic range Pikmin. Next up we have Mud Pikmin. Presumably they'd be the muck and grimers of the Pikmin world, entirely capsulated in their sludgy form. Perhaps this material would lead into a new kind of hazard once again with mud. I would imagine this would be a kind of sticky surface that traps Pikmin, though perhaps it could be tar or glue instead, which, by the way, instantly clicks it back to that hazard video again. As a combat mechanic idea, perhaps due to their texture they are slower to be consumed, or at least they are the last choice to a carnivorous creature. After all, a passive mechanic of the blue Pikmin is to be picked off first due to their texture and tastiness, supposedly, so perhaps the opposite could reign true here, though this could all be a myth I heard years ago. Keeping with the sticky idea, the Pikmin could also have that anti-gravity effect I keep raving on about, having them able to walk against steeper and steeper surfaces for a particular action. They could also, in a backwards turn of events, be the only Pikmin to move freely on a sticky surface. And if such a surface was introduced to the game, then perhaps bringing back the jetpack from Hey Pikmin could allow for the captains to freely travel across such surfaces without having to worry about the hazard themselves. This, I imagine, would be an automatic animation for certain areas. Using it as a manual button could be overcomplicating the situation, especially with things like unfinished bridges. Another thing that could help them in combat is the ability to stick to creatures even when being shaken off, only releasing if the beast is defeated, or they are whistled off. or another hazard comes to throw them off like a sudden electrical charge, if the creature has that ability. Pulling away from the sticky idea, what if mud Pikmin simply had the ability to spit mud? We've seen a spitting ability before with the white Pikmin in the Pikmin short movies, but assuming they either don't return or the mud has a different reaction, perhaps this could be used to affect the environment around them. As a start, I'm now imagining the mud to act as a kind of paint, rather than a corrosive acid. As a starting point, maybe a creature who has been splattered with mud can be particularly susceptible to other Pikmin attacks, and the mud has a kind of sensitivity effect. This could also work for walls. Hitting them with mud could make their destruction all the more quicker. Or it could just do damage on its own, as a slightly ranged projectile kind of attack. Going back to the sticky idea, maybe mud Pikmin are needed to dirty up a surface for the other Pikmin to stick to use as a climbing or grounding tool. Or as a slightly complicated idea, maybe a muddied creature could be slowed down as more mud accumulates onto them. Color-wise, it sounds right for them to be brown. Nothing else really fits. Next up on my list is Magnetic Pikmin, but I'm sure you've heard plenty about it already, plus its attributes mostly line up with the sticky factor once again alongside some metallic and magnetic hazards once again, so we'll just mention it here officially and move on. Yeah, cool. Next up comes from an amalgamation of multiple past ideas that all come together to this. Fang Pikmin. Teeth and fangs are a naturally physical trait which we have yet to see in the Pikmin franchise. I mean, technically, we haven't even seen a mouth yet. Blues have gills. Now this idea first came to mind once again from that darn hazard video, especially with the plastic hazards idea, which suggested some kind of corrosive Pikmin to melt through it. This could be where the Fang Pikmin come in, as they could literally bite and eat their way through such a hazardous material. The idea of a carnivorous Pikmin, however, has existed for a while, as we have often mentioned in the past with the Venus Flytrap Pikmin, with the idea behind it being rather than having a standard flower atop their head, they have more inspiration from the Venus Flytrap. Again, this links quite nicely to the eating mechanic for edible hazards. As a combative mechanic, though not much really needs to be added, they could also be given the 1.5 times damage or even 2 times damage because of their obviously toothier advantage. Beyond that though, I admittedly struggle to find any more mechanics for such a Pikmin, having a similar fate to the blues as simply being needed to access certain areas. Next up is a particularly odd Pikmin idea, based off of the different trajectory possibilities for each Pikmin type. So far we've always had Pikmin thrown in an arc in front of the player, yellow shoot particularly higher, purple throw more at a right angle, and spring Pikmin bounce a couple times on paper. So to really change this game, what if we had some kind of bowling ball Pikmin? And what I mean, of course, is giving Pikmin trajectories the Skyward Sword treatment. Instead of always throwing a Pikmin up in an arc, we instead roll them along the ground. It's a weird idea, I know, and perhaps they're not bowling balls, but marbles, or just coiled Pikmin, or just ball Pikmin. Ideas for this kind of Pikmin would pretty much all go into mobility though. Say we had some kind of small entrance that slopes upwards inside a stump or a wall or something. Rolling ball Pikmin into this entrance could allow them and only them to enter through and probably open a pathway or simply get to another area. Though we have also already seen Pikmin 3 Pikmin coil up into ball form for icy slides, so maybe this could also simply work as a new mechanic idea as a throwing type for Pikmin. Or could be tweaked for a new ability of the already ballish rock Pikmin. Or maybe it's all just a bit too overcomplicated of an idea. See, now I'm getting images of some kind of pachinko machine to drop ball or rock Pikmin into. This is a strange tangent to be thinking of. But hey, it could be cool if there was a future creature that was particularly weak to this kind of trajectory, like an extra sensitively footed Bulborb. Hitting them with a series of ball Pikmin could knock it down and stun it for the rest of your squad. Coloration for this kind of Pikmin could be really anything. Nothing outright screams ball color to me. Next up is a physical trait I've heard a handful of times in the past. It's a Pikmin with multiple stems or flowers. For the sake of aesthetic, I would imagine they would just keep to having one flower so as to not look confusing in a crowd, but could have 2 stems that diverge and converge again onto the flower. What could this DNA looking Pikmin do? Well, the go-to idea is usually that they can do double damage because of the duo effect, but that seems a little too unfitting to me. So perhaps an idea for a 2-stem Pikmin could be the ability to use a zipline. This is just an idea I came up with on the top of my head, but if there's room for something to be held between the 2 stems, and they could be moved and constricted, then maybe they could latch onto something like this for transportation. It's a new mechanic we've never really considered for Pikmin before, nor have we thought about things like a cart that can go along with it. But I guess it could always be the case that other Pikmin can't handle the friction burns, or don't have the strength to hold themselves up for such a mode of transportation. Though as a mechanic, it may sound a bit limiting if only one Pikmin type can use it full stop, unless it was much smaller in design and only for small areas. Not so much covering an entire overworld area like I was first thinking. As an alternative, what if they were able to hold up other Pikmin or captains for a zip wire mechanic? More emphasis on the captains being held probably, but it could be a new way to use the space of the areas as well as the space in the gap of this two-stemmed Pikmin. Or maybe the double-stemmed Pikmin are the only type to be able to carry some kind of item, as using hands is impossible for something. Only thing I can think of is a kind of slimy substance, but hey, maybe you have a smarter idea. Coloration, I can only imagine brown or green because of the stem visuals. Next idea we have comes from another inspiration of a real-life flower, Dandelion Pikmin. How does it work? I have absolutely no idea. The general consensus for this Pikmin is the idea that it produces Pikmin sprouts sporadically, either randomly, when blown away, or when shaken or killed. Or stirred. The main issue with this is that Nintendo already experimented with this idea and chose to eliminate it. In the first Pikmin game, a deceased Pikmin could leave a sprout behind the next day. However, this was abandoned due to the random nature of this, as players would often have to detour off of their path to grab this singular Pikmin, and wouldn't be able to control their full 100 Pikmin colours until it had been collected and organised. So, what are some alternative ideas for Dandelion Pikmin? Well, considering a Dandelion seed's very light nature, I imagine this could come into play even more so here. We already have the already lighter yellow Pikmin in the games, but perhaps Dandelion Pikmin could have a similar effect as the bubble hazard from the Hazards video. For example, maybe here they are literally quite floaty in nature, their motions acting as if they have less gravity than the other Pikmin. Maybe throwing them doesn't take them up high, but could again put a further horizontal range onto them. Any kind of wind effect could have a particularly strong effect on them, but on the other hand, they could have a resistance to any kind of weighted traps. They might be pushing a little too much into the winged Pikmin territory here, but I'm sort of imagining them as the fairies of the Pikmin species. Do you think it could be too much to have them able to float on water? And by that I mean have blue Pikmin walk on the bottom of a body of water, able to swim up and about in it, have winged Pikmin fly safely above the water, out of harm's way, and Dandelion Fairy Pikmin able to simply walk along the surface of the water. There may be some tweaks needed for controlling such a Pikmin, or planning hazards and obstacles for the water surfaces, but perhaps something could be done here. The next odd idea we have is a Pikmin with absolutely no traits, a completely blank canvas of a Pikmin. Originally, one would expect it to be grey, as is the go-to blank look, but considering rock Pikmin kinda take the cake on that one, maybe they could be a kind of transparent Pikmin. Unfulfilled in colour, their purpose would be to take on any form at a later disclosed time. This Pikmin idea leans more into the idea of blending and making your own Pikmin, which is a video I would like to make in the future. This, I imagine, could be like a newer version of the Bulbmin, or at least some kind of cave Pikmin. You find them with no abilities or physical traits and spur them to become a certain type, which you require while within the cave. Perhaps this is simply done by blending like candy pop buds, or maybe it's an onion thing. Finding a totally blank onion, you could fill it with the Pikmin types to create new stuff. Maybe this is a unique way to full-on combine Pikmin types together for different uses. It's a much debated idea of overpowered and overcomplicated, but maybe it works for the blank Pikmin idea. Alternatively, maybe they're not real Pikmin. What if they were decoy Pikmin? Unuseful to you in any way other than to be consumed in place of your squad. Maybe they're an enemy creature's mimic ability to try to disguise itself away from you and other predators. Whether it fights against you despite all the odds, or tries to join you for survival only to be sacrificed in such a cruel manner. Maybe giving them some kind of nectar or potion or other item invigorates their colour, which you keep either indefinitely or for a temporary amount of time, allowing you to switch their types as if they're the all-immune Bulbmin from Pikmin 2. I'm not sure of other ideas for this Pikmin idea, but it's certainly a big thought. Okay, now we're getting to the particularly weird ideas. Dark matter Pikmin. How on earth do they work? Not a clue. This was a comment I saw in passing. Considering we barely even know the properties of dark matter in real life, I struggled to find a way to translate it into Pikmin. Thinking on this crazy space tangent though, maybe there's some kind of dimensional Pikmin, if the franchise chooses to step on Pokemon's feet for that kind of story arc. Maybe they have a Bioshock Infinite ability to teleport us to another plane, like an upside-down version of the Pikmin planet. I mean, actually, there already is a dimensional rifty element in the games with the Wraiths. The water wraith at the very least comes from a different dimension, so what if a large collection of dark matter Pikmin, or otherwise just dimensional Pikmin, could open some kind of gateway to the wraith's dimension? Everything's the same except completely different, reusing every map of the game with a new reworking to it. If that's the case, I'd imagine them to have a water wraith aesthetic too, since they would also be able to switch dimensions. On a simpler note, maybe they can detect fully invisible items. We've had buried things found by the white Pikmin, so an entirely invisible tool could be an interesting mechanic for these dimension Pikmin. Maybe we can feel around it without them, but cannot actively interact with them without the dimensional Pikmin, because the item is in another dimensional plane, and the dimensional Pikmin are the ones that can go through the dimension and pull it into R1. This could also linger to walls and bridges. Maybe they can have that Mario Galaxy effect of lighting up invisible things to be touched. Maybe that illumination is what pulls them into our dimension. A fully invisible bridge that dimensional Pikmin can illuminate seems pretty awesome to me. I originally imagined them to have some kind of spacey black hole effect on them, as if they had a slight gravitational pull or something, but actually, this invisible dimensional backstory thing actually sounds really awesome. And it sparked a completely new story arc possibility to be explored. Though I doubt the Pikmin games would actually explore this path, it does sound super cool in speculation. Imagine an entirely invisible creature that can't interact with us either until we see it with the dimensional Pikmin. Man, that sounds terrifying and cool. Next up is a Pikmin concept that admittedly had been kinda covered in every regard by the previous Pikmin mentioned in this video: Slime Pikmin. Visually, I'm reminded of the water wraith dimensional look again, or the transparency of the fairy Dandelion Pikmin, the sludginess of the mud Pikmin and the sticky mechanic of them too. They, for the most part, would act as an alternative version to the mud Pikmin, perhaps if glue or goo was the sludgy material over mud in this scenario. Their extra chewiness in battle could also come into play, as well as their anti-gravity-ness. And in all regards, I'm struggling to think of something new for a slime Pikmin exclusively. They sound like the extension of a jelly float, so maybe they could literally inflate or combine and contain other Pikmin and captains inside them. Maybe for traversing a slime-only area or to carry everyone up along walls or ceilings, you can command all Pikmin to be carried by the slime Pikmin. Maybe slime Pikmin can specifically use their viscousness to splatter and solidify to make impromptu bridges or something for the rest of the squad. Beyond that, I'm out of ideas. Second to last on our list is Luma Pikmin. Presumably not the Lumas from Mario Galaxy, I presume the idea behind this is them being light Pikmin, emitting a glow much like the glow caps while in caves, or in the overworld they could light up at a nighttime setting or activate plant life around them. This whole idea when not overshadowing the yellows has actually already been discussed in my old Pikmin 4 ideas video, so here's a card to see it here, but otherwise, let's move on. The final thing on our list here is the concept of Hologram Pikmin. Uses for them again seem quite limited. Maybe they're dimensional Pikmin, inaccessible in another plane, or they're more decoy Pikmin. Perhaps they have the ability to outright walk through walls to access something on the other side. In all honesty, at this point, I'm completely out of ideas for this Pikmin idea. If you have ideas for how it could be considered along with any of the other ideas mentioned, do let us know. Otherwise, for now, it's the final paragraph. We've discussed a bunch of different Pikmin ideas. Now let's combine them. So we've already heard how mud and slime can be combined. They have the same stickiness or could be merged into a carrying entity. Maybe a slime spitting Pikmin is also possible, with the slime once again making the creatures more damageable, like the Splatoon ink in Smash Bros. Ultimate. The spring Pikmin springiness could also complement the fairy Dandelion Pikmin, as they're both quite similar. Both boast a longer range and lighter feel, so perhaps fairy Pikmin with their light demeanor can also wall jump along a vent for extra height. They could also be thrown across a stepping stone path, or perhaps don't even need it, bouncing naturally across the surface of the water. The biggest issue here is deciding whether they are strong or weak towards stickiness, as I would say this is their biggest clash. Luma Pikmin and their enlightening ability could be passed over to the dimensional Pikmin we saw earlier, as they could literally be used to light up those invisible items we mentioned previously. It would be acting especially similar to certain auto-scrolling levels from the Galaxy games. Perhaps the dimensional Pikmin themselves are slimy and sludgy. It fits with the Wraith parallels as well as allows for more dimensional coverage. Perhaps spitting slime onto invisible items makes them accessible, or by leaving a trail of slime behind temporarily, we can see invisible bridges or track marks. It would be especially cool to find hidden pathways with an invisible mechanic. Suddenly, games with coded invisible walls would be a lot more suspicious. Maybe a double-stemmed Pikmin could hold lanterns or other forms of light like the Luma Pikmin for caves, darkened areas, or something similar. Maybe this light opens invisible options. Maybe the blank Pikmin comes from the other dimension. They can't do anything ability-wise, but collecting a bunch of them allows you to open a gate and cross dimensions, like a giant escort mission. What fun. Or maybe these blank dimensional Pikmin can do nothing except light the invisible path. They're simply the scouts of the species. Slime or mud or sludge Pikmin could be the type that use the ball trajectory. Their liquidy-ish nature allows them to be formed into a ball and slid along a path. Maybe even the slime they leave acts as a way to speed them up against the floor, something other Pikmin cannot do. Perhaps combining the fang with the sludgy Pikmin works too, as they could spit their sludge and eat it afterwards, as a kind of cyclical cycle of making something weaker and then consuming it. Or the same could be said for the dimensional Pikmin, giving them fangs to change how they work with the rest of the Pikmin. Since bashing it is the usual mode of attacking, maybe actively biting is a little bit savage, something necessary for survival in a dimension where wraiths are normal and expected. Or maybe everything can be combined into the blank Pikmin to create the super Pikmin, able to spit, be, or form mud, sludge, slime, glue, or goo, able to be rolled into a ball form along the floor with the lightness to bounce vertically or range further forward, wall jumping off of surfaces, lighting up pathways and opening rifts into the other dimension. With 2 stems, they can reach and latch onto any zip lines and hold pure light within them to open the view into the pure darkness that is the upside down world of the other side of the Pikmin planet, all while eating through any plastics and defying the laws of gravity. Of course, it's not confirmation, it's all speculation. And all this begs the question, how would the Pikmin games possibly handle all these varieties of Pikmin? Well, someone named Dead Channel 2 years ago left this comment. I would kind of like if every Pikmin type was put into the main game, but you could only take out 5 types at a time. That way you could have access to all types and still get 5 groups of 20 to get the Easter eggs. Who knows how it'll all work, if it'll even work at all, but hey, it's fun to think about anyway. Do be sure to share your ideas for Pikmin mentioned or not, but for now, I'm gonna head off. Do be sure to check out my Twitch or Twitter page for the latest streaming schedule, but for now, my name's been Daz. You didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit.